I'd like to just have her have this as an expression of the City Club's appreciation for her fine work. Thank you, Fern. Thank you all. I miss you all. And now we're ready for our featured speaker of the day, Christopher Coburn. One of the buzzwords of our time is competition. We have a City Club study committee, or actually 6 study committees, now at work on a strategy for economic development for Oregon, which will emphasize methods by which our state can become more competitive. This follows a decision made several years ago that the club would concentrate its efforts on a few premier issues, one of which is economic development. One of the states from which Oregon may be able to learn something is Ohio, which has what is called the Thomas Edison Program for revitalizing its economy. Their methods involve bringing together scientists, business people, and agriculture in a working partnership for applied research. It is one of the largest public-private high-tech programs in the United States, and it has been responsible for generating new ideas, new products, and new companies. To tell us about the Ohio experience, we have with us today Christopher Coburn, Executive Director of Ohio's Thomas Edison Program. He also is Deputy Director of the Ohio Department of Development and is the Science and Technology Advisor to Ohio's Governor Richard Celeste. He has extensive experience in management and public administration as well as in technology. Also, this is not his first trip to Oregon. I understand from talking with him earlier that he bicycled across the country and spent several grueling days in Oregon a few years ago, making it over the Mackenzie Pass. We're delighted that he could meet with us today. Chris Coburn.
Thank you, Susan. It's a pleasure to be here in sunny and warm Portland. I'm not sure what the weather's like today in Columbus, but it has been beautiful the 2 days I've been here. Giving this speech on international competitiveness today reminds me of an experience 2 of my coworkers from the state of Ohio had in Germany recently. As their week-long trade mission was drawing to a close, they decided to venture out into rural Germany. Not a smart idea since neither of them spoke German. Everything went well for them until they decided to attend a church service on Sunday morning. They took a seat in the second row. There was one lone gentleman sitting in front of them, and they decided, not being able to understand the language, that they would do everything this gentleman did. He stood, they stood. He sat, they sat. They were fine until the very end of the service, when they stood up along with the gentleman, and the entire congregation broke out laughing. They turned around, and everyone else was still seated. They were embarrassed and perplexed, and on the way out of the church, the minister said to them in perfect English, "You must be Americans." They asked him how he knew that they were Americans, and he said to them, "Well, when you stood at the end of the service, I'd asked for the father of the new baby in the congregation to stand." The moral of that story is, even if you can't speak the language of the competition, you need to pay close attention to how they do things. Discussions of industrial competitiveness are sweeping Washington. Both national parties are struggling to find not only new slogans, but also some substance with which to tackle this important issue. In his State of the Union address on January 27th, President Reagan told the nation that if we act now, we will not lose our competitive edge. He also said, however, that his campaign to achieve this goal would not be measured by new proposals or new funding, but it would be measured by American spirit and American grit. Try trading that on the Tokyo Stock Exchange. At least 4 aspiring Democratic presidential candidates are promoting competitiveness strategies. Their proposals range from a retooling of society's attitude to a windfall increase in research and development spending of $20 billion a year over 5 years. The new Speaker of the House, Jim Wright, says competitiveness may be the dominant economic issue of the remaining years of the 20th century. If either major party hopes to realize a comprehensive competitiveness strategy, it will first have to recognize the leadership provided by state governments, which are the breeding grounds for innovation on this issue. Competitiveness may be a new issue to the federal government, but it's old news for the states. While the precedents for forward-looking national strategies are few and far between, the 50 state governments have long been laboratories for policy experimentation. Across the country, states have implemented competitiveness strategies using their own resources. With little support and no recognition from the federal government, states have reordered priorities and vigorously pursued far-reaching economic policies. Ohio is one of those states that has fashioned strategies to create new partnerships among government, industry, and academia. States like Ohio now recognize that to hold our own and foreign markets, we must learn from the competition. Just as Japan and Western Europe have demonstrated the benefits of linking academic and industrial bases, states have learned to maximize their native resources and direct them towards the world marketplace. I'd like to discuss these strategies with you today and share some of the insights we have gained over the last 4 challenging and often exasperating years. Let me begin by observing something that this audience, only 50 miles from the state capital of Oregon, is already well aware of. The role of the states is changing. The traditional notion of federal government as the sole benefactor of public sector R&D has been challenged by more than 500 state and local high-tech programs. In the last 3 years, over $450 million has been appropriated at the state level alone for applied research programs. For state governments, support of R&D is a relatively new role, but its goal is long-standing. Dating back to 1791, when New Jersey implemented a tax abatement program, states have spearheaded economic development initiatives with an eye toward creating jobs. Nearly 2 centuries later, this prime motivation for state government action remains firmly in place. However, the means of achieving these ends has changed dramatically as our society has become increasingly more technological. As one former governor put it, the application of scientific knowledge is the basis for economic expansion and diversification, and the key to the formation of new businesses and the competitive survival of old ones. This sober realization arose from an intense reexamination of state strategies and priorities brought on by the recession of 1982. At the end of that year, Ohio alone had over 700,000 people unemployed, more than the population of 7 states. Cleveland, the largest metropolitan area in Ohio, was in the midst of losing 115,000 manufacturing jobs. Acknowledging that change was necessary, governors went looking to other states, not to steal their foundries and production plants, but to learn. The smokestack chasing and chip chasing of the 1970s were hollow, self-defeating strategies, turning state against state with no real economic gain. The nation as a whole suffered from this zero-sum approach to economic development. Eventually, governors discovered that several of their colleagues, most notably Governor Hunt of North Carolina and Governor Thornburgh of Pennsylvania, had embarked on ambitious programs that committed their states to technological innovation. The newly found independence of state governments has since led to a variety of innovative programs: research consortia, seed and venture capital funds, business incubators, endowed chairs, and equipment subsidies. Today, the states finally have a forum for the exchange of innovative ideas and collective communication with the federal research and development complex. Governor Celeste of Ohio now chairs a National Governors Association working group on state high-tech programs. Over 30 states participate in the group's triennial meetings held in Washington, D.C. The exchange of information provided by this forum is vital to the states as we pursue sophisticated initiatives to support university and industry partnerships. Despite this new era of state cooperation and leadership, there are no set models to guide the governors. States have had to rely on their own creative instincts. While issues and goals may be similar in each state, the particular blend of economic circumstances will always differ from one area to another. Furthermore, new performance measures are needed. Governors can no longer simply point to a new factory or a new university laboratory when legislators and taxpayers want to know where their dollars have gone. Long-term research programs run counter to the notion of a quick payoff on state investments. Not only are legislators being told to wait for a return, but a whole new set of rules are being put into place. Governors are asking state legislatures to forget about the peanut butter philosophy of state government. The grand tradition of peanut butter in state government explains why we in Ohio have 13 state universities, 32 regional campuses, 7 medical schools, and 23 two-year colleges. That's in a state with a population of 10.7 million people. In Ohio and elsewhere, governments are recognizing that research excellence cannot necessarily be achieved by merely spreading dollars to every corner of the state. In this context, the Ohio Competitiveness Strategy was created in 1983 with a $500 million budget deficit looming and almost 15% unemployment. Governor Celeste introduced a comprehensive fiscal and economic strategy built around a centerpiece high technology initiative, the Thomas Edison Program. The Ohio strategy, in a little over 3 years, has directed more than $1 billion of state, private, and federal resources towards Ohio's future. This broad effort is aimed at the intellectual and industrial foundations of the state of Ohio. Besides the Edison program, it involves factory modernization, worker retraining, educational excellence, labor management cooperation, industrial training, research scholars, and clean coal technologies. Ohio's Thomas Edison program is a $200 million public-private partnership to promote technological innovation through university-industry linkages. Every major Ohio university and over 370 corporations are involved. The program builds on Ohio's traditional strengths and at the same time gives the state a foothold in emerging industries. The Edison program has received enthusiastic, bipartisan, statewide support, a rarity in Ohio politics. It is a unique, and for us in Ohio, extraordinary model of economic development. This homegrown effort has 3 components: seed capital grants, technology incubators, and research consortia. Each aspect involves a business-driven partnership between university and academia. All funds granted by the state must be matched by the industrial partner on at least a 1-to-1 basis. This matching requirement accomplishes 2 goals. Most obviously, it stretches the state investment. It also serves as an indirect market test for a proposed technology. If the private sector does not want to match the state's investment, the state assumes reasonably that it is probably not an area that we should be in. Our seed capital program, known as the Edison Seed Development Fund, has so far backed 66 individual applied research projects. This aspect of the Edison program allows us to work with any corporate partner in the state and has included the smallest of startups as well as corporate giants such as NCR and General Electric. We have invested in technologies ranging from non-smear newspaper ink to colorectal cancer probes. Grants range from $50,000 to $250,000 and are made to universities that execute the research for and with the corporate partner. If the state-aided research is successful, the business commits to producing the new technology in Ohio. The second component of the Edison program is technology incubators. These 6 enterprises provide a safe harbor to new companies during their difficult infancy. The incubators rely heavily on the combined support of academic institutions and corporations, including special arrangements with seed and venture capital funds. These incubators attempt to leverage a large domestic supply in Ohio of venture capital. Over $119 million of public pension funds have been invested in the state since Ohio became the first state to authorize their use as venture capital. Historically, the failure rate of startup companies may be as high as 85%. And in 1.5 years of the Edison Technology Incubator Program, these facilities have cut this rate to 10%. A total of 67 tenant companies now employ over 200 Ohioans. Within the past 2 years, 7 of these companies have graduated to their own facilities. Finally, we have established 8 technology centers with a ninth center on its way. These university industry consortia are located throughout the state and are expanding on Ohio's strengths in polymer engineering, advanced manufacturing, welding, animal biotechnology, and information systems. The Edison Welding Institute, or EWI for short, has 159 corporate members. EWI was founded as a partnership among Battelle Memorial Institute, the British Welding Institute, and Ohio State University, the other OSU. And it is supported by has been supported by almost $11 million from the state of Ohio. It has also recently established a West Coast satellite, which we are very excited about, with the Oregon Graduate Center. EWI is the largest welding center of its kind in North America, and in a little over 2 years has completed over 300 research projects. A key industry journal, Welding Design and Fabrication, wrote of EWI in its November 1985 issue, "If this country is ever to have one top-notch welding development organization, this is it." Another one of our centers, the Edison Polymer Innovation Corporation, EPIC for short, is a partnership among Case Western Reserve University, the University of Akron, and corporate giants such as Goodrich, Goodyear, and Firestone. Its 400 researchers serve a burgeoning polymer industry with over 12,000 polymer-related companies within 100 miles of the center. An Epic-developed synthetic wound dressing has recently received a great deal of attention in the medical community. In each of these centers, we see projects and companies which are starting to take off. Private capital is flowing to the firms, and products are going to the market. This brings me to the federal government and the future relationships, or lack thereof, between state and federal high-tech programs. To date, there has been little cause for optimism in this area. Although many states, in addition to Ohio, have been showing success in the support of applied research, the federal government has yet to wake up to this. Consider these three developments. First, 2 years ago, the National Science Foundation created the Engineering Research Center program. Its goals and objectives sound very familiar to those of the Edison Technology Centers. Despite the similarity and potential for cooperation, the NSF set up centers in 2 states which directly compete with centers each state had previously created in a nearby location. When asked why the NSF didn't seek to coordinate with the existing state centers, the NSF replied that competition is good. Second, in October of last year, the U.S. Congress passed the Federal Technology Transfer Act of 1986. This created federal research consortia for technology transfer. These consortia are to be located throughout the country. Although we strongly support the goals of this initiative, it has left federal officials struggling to create their own technology transfer mechanisms with little or no input from the states. And finally, increasing defense R&D spending continues to benefit only a small portion of the U.S. In Ohio, we receive less in federal support than we send to Washington. For a large state, our share of federal R&D spending is minimal. The potential impact of federal dollars cannot be overstated. Economists are just beginning to realize that the economic model of Route 128 in Silicon Valley cannot be recreated anywhere else in this country, and for that matter, anywhere else on this planet. These technological boomtowns are driven by an extraordinary concentration of defense R&D that provides little benefit for the rest of the national economy. If states are going to shape their own technological future, it must be with their own native resources. The Edison program is a model that has special relevance here in Oregon, which in FY86 ranked 48th in the nation in the amount of defense contract dollars. Looking at recent statistics, both Oregon and Ohio have been virtually neglected by the Department of Defense and other federal agencies. The number of defense contracts awarded here in Oregon amounts to only $95 per capita. Let's compare that to $1,111 and $807 in California and the state of Washington, respectively. The FY 1988 federal budget, released 2 weeks ago, contains self-congratulatory language on economic competitiveness. It talks about improving the nation's competitive edge through the support of a new civil technology plan, the expansion of the Strategic Defense Initiative, and the creation of new U.S. Department of Energy programs. Each of these is sure to have an impact in California, Massachusetts, and maybe the state of Washington, but not in Ohio or Oregon. The new federal budget also talks about a 76% increase in funding for scientific research between 1982 and 1988. However, it does nothing to address the problem of translating research findings into usable products and technology. How much of this research has been left needlessly on the lab bench instead of becoming an engine for economic growth? And how much of it has needlessly duplicated existing research efforts in other parts of the country? The United States simply cannot afford the incredibly wasteful practice of having federal and state governments pursuing separate yet parallel paths. It is difficult to explain why our nation's capital continues to ignore what the Washington Post called an upheaval in the way America is learning to compete economically in the world. The Post article titled, "Do You Want to Compete with Japan? Ask Ohio," correctly observed that these best and brightest competitiveness programs in place today were not the product of Washington wizardry. What does all this mean for Oregon? Clearly, like the state of Ohio, you cannot afford to sit back and wait for the federal government to provide you with the funding or the strategy to look out for your own state's competitiveness. You're going to have to learn you're going to have to turn away from Washington and turn to other states if you expect to find applicable models for successful action. As suggested earlier, I believe that the Ohio example is far more relevant for you than are the activities of your neighbor to the south. If Ohio in fact can be a model for Oregon, I would like to stress a few of the lessons we have learned to date. One, don't underestimate the level of commitment necessary to achieve research excellence. The $100 million in direct and indirect funding our legislature has invested in the Edison program in the state's last two biennial budgets is an unprecedented and difficult level to sustain. With a 5% tax cut last month, our upcoming budget is very tight. Nevertheless, it maintains a similar commitment to the Edison program while other, more traditional programs are being cut. Be aware that a program to support the cutting edge of research by definition brings with it a significant element of risk. There will be failures, but in the long run, they should be heavily outweighed by the successes. 3, avoid raising expectations too high or too soon. Elected officials and constituents alike need to be reminded that these are long-term efforts. And lastly, look within Oregon to set your own agenda. Ohio's program is designed to build on our state's existing strengths. Furthermore, to be successful, a program like this needs to have the commitment of local communities, business leaders, and state officials. In conclusion, there are many things state governments can do to address the competitiveness issue. States that squander their competition on each other or the federal government won't have any left for our economic rivals abroad. To be truly effective, we must find creative ways to promote coordination between state competitiveness programs and the federal government. Most importantly, state policymakers nationwide are going to have to make economic competitiveness a concrete fiscal priority and not just a rhetorical whipping post. It's going to take vision and guts to throw off the quick payoff blinders and make the tough decisions to prepare for the future. But it will be a lot more painful in the long run if we don't. In Ohio, we have chosen to take positive action before the situation became a crisis. So far, we are encouraged by the results. In the absence of a comprehensive federal strategy, we feel that the state governments can and should lead the struggle for U.S. competitiveness abroad. Thank you for your invitation. It's been a pleasure speaking to you.
Now comes the fun part for us. We get to ask questions. Just a reminder, questions are limited to members of the City Club. A microphone is being set up in the middle of the room, and after Ann has asked her first question, questioners just line up there and I'll recognize you and go ahead and ask your question. As usual, the privilege of asking the first question of the day resides with our board host, who today is Ann Jarvis, treasurer of the club. Ann?
Thank you, Susan. Chris, I wonder if you could comment on some of your insights on how Ohio was able to achieve such broad-based bipartisan support to initiate the Thomas Edison Program in the first place.
Well, I think the true answer to that question is that hardship brings opportunity. In 1982 and 83, there was a clear recognition in Ohio that something was gravely wrong with the direction of the state. Again, we had almost 15% unemployment. The different sectors of leaders in the state, business leaders, community leaders, political leaders, we're all well aware that the past strategies were not working for the state. Smokestack chasing had devastated Ohio, giving outrageous tax advantages to large corporations who may or may not employ people in your state. We supported the creation of a Miller brewery outside of Dayton that still has yet to produce a barrel of beer at a tremendous expense to the state. There was a recognition that there had to be change, and my boss, Governor Celeste, came in January of 1983 and was able to take advantage of that and worked with both houses in our legislature. And since that time, I think our legislature has been very open-minded about the Edison program, and we have worked closely with them to involve them in decision-making since then. So when I go back to Columbus on Sunday, and start working again with the legislature on Monday, I hope that our budget message, which they've now had a week to ponder, will still find them supporting the Edison program.
Go ahead and please identify yourself and go ahead with your questions.
Thank you. My name's James Stewart. I have what I hope is a difficult question. I thought long and hard during your presentation and say, well, maybe we can come up with something hard here. This economy has managed, the United States economy has managed to create something over 30 million jobs in the last 15 years. We've managed to absorb the entire push of the baby boom into the job market. We've managed to produce a seemingly ever-increasing number of women who are working outside of the home. Yet, during that 15-year period, certainly no more than about 1/8 of all the new jobs have been anything remotely connected with high tech. Commentators from Peter Drucker through people in the Commerce Department maintain that that fraction will remain true for the foreseeable future. In light of that, how do we justify the sort of spending, the sort of program that you're talking about in high tech, particularly given the structure that's already in place to the National Science Foundation, the land-grant universities, corporate research, Department of Defense research?
Short answer is yes. No. One thing, I violated one of my own rules today. In Ohio, I never refer to our program as a high-tech program for that very reason. It's not. It's easier to convey the ideas behind it, describing it as that, but it's a program to support innovation throughout the Ohio economy. We in Ohio, and one of the things that showed up clearly in our examination of our state's economy in 1983 was Ohio is a manufacturing state. It's going to be a manufacturing state in the 1990s, and it's going to be a manufacturing state in the next century. We are not going to be home to the semiconductor industry, and we're not trying to be a home to it. We want to support what Ohio is strong at, and the things that have characterized the Ohio economy in the past. I mentioned our Polymer Center. Ohio leads the country, or it ranks in the top 3 in almost every measure of polymer output. Value added, workers involved, total investment. That's, I don't know what high tech is even. I haven't found anyone who can adequately define it, but maybe polymers are high tech, maybe they're not. But they are an industry that's going to grow. The last statistic I saw said that right now it's something like a $10 billion industry, and the estimates are that by the year 2000 it'll be a $100 billion industry. That's what we're backing. Now, I think high tech to the Department of Labor and a lot of economists means the electronics industry, which I know is a sensitive subject here in Oregon. That's not really part of our strategy, but we are supporting new technologies and new innovations in basic industries and new industries. We have an information storage and retrieval effort in Ohio involving some companies that a lot of people aren't even aware are in Ohio. CompuServe, the company that has the largest number of retail database users in the country. Me Data Central's in Dayton. The attorneys here in the audience are, I'm sure, familiar with Nexus and Lexis. Chemical Abstracts is headquartered in Columbus. They have the world's largest online database. So there really is a pocket of that in the state, and we see that as a growing industry. So we've backed it so far with a $6 million investment. So for us, the high-tech moniker is somewhat of a misnomer. New ideas, new people, new visions are what we're really trying to back.
Ryan Lawrence, City Club member. What do you do with respect to, in your partnerships with corporations, to get money back into the state from those partnerships? If you make money in a project, does money go back to the state, besides in taxes? Okay.
For the seed capital program, let me answer on that first, because that's really, I think, what you're asking about. When we make the investment, the larger investment, or actually either size investment, we have two different sizes, Class 1 and Class 2, 50,000 and 250,000. When we make the investment, they agree to make all good faith efforts to create jobs in Ohio. That is our first and number one priority, far beyond getting the money back. And that's how we evaluate all new projects, their potential to create jobs, their potential to impact on the economy. Now, for our larger grants, for the Class 2 grants, we do request a limited royalty. That's if the project is successful, we expect to get back the money plus the cost of the money and nothing else. We're not interested in becoming equity partners with the company. We're just interested, if the company does take off, if this technology works out, it's only appropriate that state be rewarded for the risk that they participated in, and also from the standpoint if this company is growing, the company has owes something to the taxpayers. So that's from the sense of getting money back in the state coffers. That's our only direct money link. With our technology centers, when a product is developed that's patentable or has some marketability, we expect that money to flow back to the technology centers, and they will then in turn grow. And hopefully that will expedite the day when we won't be subsidizing those centers on an annual basis, which is what we're doing now.
As a follow-up to that, have you had any sort of measurable rate of return?
It's a little early. As a matter of fact, we're just now getting our first royalty check from the project I mentioned with the colorectal cancer probe. So it's a little early to judge that. We're not going to mirror venture capital funds. That's not the goal here. That's not the way we work, and that's not the way we structured our financial agreements. So I couldn't really give you a specific answer on that.
Roger Ice, City Club member. With improved competitiveness, higher productivity, you're also talking about, I presume, new labor force skills, yet I haven't heard you address any state effort to provide that.
Yes. Actually, we have a very extensive program. I didn't want to try to include every single element of our strategy. I thought people would like to be out of here by 1:30 or 2. But yes, industrial training is a key component of our program in Ohio, and the statistic is 90% or 95% of the year 1990 workforce is working today, and 75% of the year 2000 workforce is working today. So the challenge to an economy or a region is to assure that your workers are able to deal with the newest technologies. And consequently, we've set up a $22 million per biennium industrial training program, so when there is a potential to either create or retain jobs by an expansion of a factory or bringing in new equipment into a factory, we, the state, will fund a portion of the cost of training those workers. In Ohio, we're committed to our workforce. We believe it's highly skilled and well educated. But on the other hand, it needs to stay up with the new technologies if, again, our state's going to remain competitive.
Hello, I'm Jeannie Dodson-Edgars. I have a question about what was a magic that decreased business failures? Was it the magic of money or what?
Well, if you're talking about the business incubators.
Yes, you said the failure rate dramatically decreased.
Yeah. Well, first of all, just a brief word of what incubators are in case people aren't familiar with the concept. The idea is you provide a facility with low-cost real estate cost and shared resources, so the company can thereby lower its overhead rate. And by and large, as a concept, it's being implemented across the country. I think it was originally big in Scotland and then spread throughout Western Europe. I would say that any incubator is going to lower the failure rate. The question is, how long will these companies survive? Now, you notice I mentioned how long we've been in this, which is only a year and a half. I think my feeling would be that that's probably not a scientifically valid length of time. It's only 10% now. I'm not sure what it's going to be in 3 or 4 years. We're encouraged, though. And again, we have the graduates of the incubators. We have basically the lease in the incubators is you can only stay in for 2 years. Either you're going to make it or you're going to fail during that time. Occasionally they'll extend them. But when the companies graduate, generally we're looking at an expansion of the number of people that they're going to employ. So the true answer to your question is the failure rate's been reduced and reduced dramatically. Whether or not we can sustain that, I'm not sure.
Georgiana Johns, City Club member. What are the different kinds of relationships that the Edison program has formed with the state's universities?
Okay. Another point to emphasize here, we work with both the public and private universities in Ohio, 13 public, and in terms of research, 2 major private universities. The program works with the universities in a couple different ways. The seed grants, again, as I said, are made directly to the universities, who then execute the research for and with the corporate partner. So we necessarily have to have a relationship with all those universities because we are making grants to them, and we have a very strong and relationship we're pretty pleased with them. Now, through the technology centers, the universities are, let's call them institutional partners with companies. The seed grants, the partnerships build around one technology, one research project. The technology centers, we hope that we've created institutions that are going to survive well out into the next century. So we see those partnerships, those linkages between University of Akron, which is a public university, and Case Western Reserve University, which is a private university, that had never worked together before, even though they were rated in the top 10 and sometimes the top 5 of polymer science and application programs nationwide. They were only 25 miles apart. They had never worked together before. They've linked up now with major corporations, as I said, Goodrich, Goodyear, GenCorp, Firestone, and we want to see those partnerships survive. They're going to survive as they pump out more and more technologies. So that's a long-term link between the companies and the universities. In terms of our link to the universities in that level, there's not really a strong one. We're looking to build the business university link and keep the state role to a minimum. And we're trying to see a very limited and a very narrowly defined role for the state here, and that's to be a facilitator. It's not appropriate for the state to be making business decisions or making research investment decisions. We want to put that responsibility in the hands of the people who run the research consortia.
George Forrester. What you're spending money now for the last 4 years on this program, how does that balance against, say, the previous 4 years in terms of state budgets for economic development? Because you've transferred.
Well, it's hard for me to answer that question because when we came in, the state's books were not really in order, and it was hard for us to put those numbers into our system. I could call up my office and get a printout of every single grant we've made across our economic development department, across the Board of Regents and the like, where it went, how many jobs it supposedly created. That kind of record keeping didn't exist in the previous administration, which governor will remain nameless. So I can't really answer the question, but I think I can give you an indication, which is very little. The state's economic development activities before 1983 were essentially smokestack chasing. The last great success that the previous administration had was pouring, I think it was in excess of $20 million to try to save an international harvester plant, which then laid off most of its people after the state had built them roads and other infrastructure improvements. That was the strategy. Ohio took pride in being a low-tax state that was willing to do anything to support corporations. The motto of the Economic Development Department was, business is not a dirty word. Not that we think it's a dirty word, but we try to be a little more informed about what business's needs are.
Ogden Beeman, City Club member. It seems like you're talking about financial commitments by the state in the $100 million to $200 million range for this program. Oregon's about 20% of the size of your state, so maybe we're talking 20 million to 40 million in this state. We have a new governor who has pledged himself to no increased taxes and to a full rebate to the citizens of any override from the new federal tax laws. And essentially, we're talking sort of like a zero-sum game budget scenario. And maybe this is a follow-up on the previous question. Can you give us any clues or hints from the Ohio experience of where dollars might be transferred from to take off on a program such as you described?
All I can say is I'm glad I work in Ohio and I don't work in Salem. It's going to be tough. I read the newspaper clips before I came out here, and I've seen the Oregonian since I've been here. It's a difficult position to create new programs when there's no new revenues. The give back of the federal tax increase or windfall was something we had to do in Ohio, which we weren't. We wanted a chance to evaluate that, but that wasn't a possibility. And as a matter of fact, I said we had a tight budget. That's kind of an understatement. We have the smallest increase in 26 years in state budgets, and that's going through good times and bad. It's a 1% increase, which is very difficult. And the 1% includes a new tax on cigarettes, closing some loopholes, and some other revenue-raising mechanisms. It's a tough way to go. Let me just say, in 1983, it must be obvious by now, we did increase taxes, and that is never popular in Ohio. Governor Celeste lost an election in 1978 because he made the mistake of saying, yeah, he would consider increasing taxes when his opponent said he wouldn't. Between 1978 and 1982, the state raised taxes 32 times, 32 separate acts by the legislature to raise, temporarily raise taxes. And consequently, that kind of state budgeting put the state $500 million in the red. So we came in and we raised taxes. We raised taxes across the board on income. We readjusted income and actually took off in aggregate sums more people from the tax rolls, and we've lower end of the tax rolls, and we basically put the state back in a sound fiscal standing. I saw the paper today that the bond rating for Oregon is kind of caught up in some kind of controversy that it doesn't look like it's something that will be a problem forever for you, but Standard & Poor's wrote a glowing report the next year about the state of the Ohio economy, and cited programs like the Edison Program, cited the fiscal soundness, and cited the management practices that we'd put in place. But I should say, in the fall of 1983, after we put this tax increase in the spring of 1983, a ballot initiative was signed during the summer, and a tax repeal was on the ballot to repeal every single dollar that we had, new revenue that we had been able to generate. And, you know, just a year away from closing schools. School systems were closed, and were closed for a long period of time during this budget crisis for Ohio. The repeal of the taxes, we were able to beat it in a relatively close vote. I think it was like 54 or 55 to 46 or 45%. But it was, you know, it was a hard go. It's hard to go through 2 elections, 2 years in a row, statewide elections, but we were able to. So obviously, you know, I'd be sensitive if I was going to stay here longer beyond Sunday to the dilemma facing the administration here. I'm not, you know, I have no really good advice. Maybe, you know, I don't want to even say. Good luck.
Isabella Chappell, member of the City Club Arts and Culture Standing Committee. I'm curious about the state of the arts in Ohio, and is there an arts component to your economic development plan?
We have an arts program. I don't think we ever really thought of it as being part of the economic development plan, and maybe we should. We have increased funding for the arts in the state. The Ohio Arts Council is much more active now than it was in the past. The governor has taken a special personal interest, as has his wife Dagmar, in the arts. As a matter of fact, they exhibit works by native Ohio artists in the governor's residence, which now has something like 30,000 people tour it on an annual basis. It's a nice setting for Ohio artists to get some exposure, as well as other things. For example, at the inaugural, the governor's wife and his 3 daughters all wore gowns designed by fashion designers in Ohio, which was a nice touch and a chance to give them some exposure. I can't give you a specific answer in terms of funding, though. That's a different part of the budget from what I'm involved in.
Bill Weber, City Club member. You aroused my curiosity a little bit when you mentioned the Oregon Graduate Center for Study and Research. My curiosity is twofold. Number one, how did you happen to become attracted to this relatively small graduate institution, private, for study and research in the physical sciences? And number two, have you talked with them enough to be able to assess the ability of Oregon state and private institutions to cooperate in research and education?
I can comment on that second question in Ohio. I'm not sure about here. The answer to the first question, though, when we created the Edison Welding Institute, the British Welding Institute, its formal name is the Welding Institute, which is the largest welding research and application center in the free world. It's got about almost 600 employees. The only one that has a bigger one are the Soviets. They had been servicing a large number of American customers for quite a while. They knew they wanted to have an American presence, and they had been looking around for several years. We came on the scene just at the time that another organization, supported by the American Welding Society, was also being established. And the British had a tough decision to go with us, a state-run organization, versus this American Welding Society organization, which was, as I remember, either in Kentucky or Tennessee. And they picked us. And we were quite fortunate, and that got the Edison Welding Institute up and running from the day it opened its doors and gave us a real leg up on other regions of the country. Well, as EWI has been run now for a little more than 2 years, it was clear to them that they needed to have, just as the British had an American firm representation, they needed to have access to these coastal markets here on the West Coast to be a viable and truly national organization, which is our goal and their goal. We want all these Edison centers to be world-class in their stated fields. So the head of the Edison Welding Institute traveled throughout the West Coast. I think they visited 30 campuses, and I'm not sure of the specifics, but they stopped at OGC, got to meet some of the people, met Bill Woods and others, as well as the leadership of the center, and they were very pleased. And from that point, the relationship grew till it was consummated a few months ago. And we're excited about it. We are committed to EWI being the national leader. And to be the national leader, it's going to have to work and help firms throughout the country, not just in Ohio. And that's, again, that's a different kind of concept for us. I think the OGC relationship will help firms in this region of Oregon and, most likely in California and Washington also. That's not something that necessarily benefits Ohio, but I think it benefits the center, which then benefits Ohio. So we're happy about that. In terms of the relationship between the OGC or other public and private universities in the state, I guess all I would say is we've been pretty proud of the fact that we've been able to get our universities to cooperate, get public and private universities to cooperate. Several of our centers involve multiple university bases, and that's, in our minds, a real achievement. And in Ohio, no small task. Again, I mentioned the statistic: 13 state universities, 32 regional campuses. That is, in my mind, 7 medical schools, an incredible number. Even though we have 4 times the population you have, that's probably more than the state can appropriately sustain.
I'm Tina Ainsley. I'm on the Standing Committee for Education for City Club member, and I was pleased to sit at the table where I am this afternoon and learn that 2 of the guests at our table are Wayne Embry and Jim Roberts, who are deputy directors of the, let's see here, Oregon Resources and Technology Development Commission, which is our Oregon model of your Edison program. And I think this is funded by our Oregon Lottery, and they have already funded 4 programs or 4 companies within our state in just the 2 months that they've been in existence. So I guess this is more of an announcement and a little bit of excitement for Oregon.
Great. And, I want to stress activity is occurring around the country. And, it's our feeling that the states working together are going to make economic development a reality in this country and make competitiveness happen. And it's going to happen in the states first and not at the federal level.
Kurt Wabering, member. Defense R&D, Oregon is low, as you indicated. Could you talk about the advantages and disadvantages of pursuing that? And I'm wondering if that is the modern version of smokestack chasing.
Good point. My governor was director of the Peace Corps during the same time your governor was the Secretary of Transportation in Washington. He has a real sensitivity for the impact of this country's arms race on our own economy, as well as the economy of not just our rivals for global power, but also the third world nations who tend to mirror our activities in the defense sector. He is firmly against the defense buildup, but it presents a quandary for the state. I'll give you a good example. The Department of Defense created something called the Software Engineering Institute. They're going to put $100 million in it over 3 or 4 years. States worked hard to bring that to their state, and I worked hard for a while to try to get it to there. I think we finally wound up being second or third in the competition. It went to Carnegie Mellon, which was a good choice. They probably deserved it. You know, you're stuck in a bind. The federal government is spending $300 billion a year on defense. That is the largest single item expenditure in the U.S. economy, and it doesn't really have a lot of ripple effect anyways, and it is bad. You know, forgive me if any economists are here who have a different theory, but this is our feeling. You know, it doesn't really benefit the economy to be shipping arms overseas. But you know, as much as this is the dedicated wish of the administration in Washington, how do states bypass that? And I agree, maybe it is. Maybe it is a misguided policy, but next time there's a Software Engineering Institute competition, I'll be there for Ohio trying to bring it to our state. You know, we really have no other choice because we can't afford to pass up a $100 million opportunity. Now, a competition we're comfortable with, and I think something that's gotten some press here in Oregon, is the superconducting supercollider, another competition that's being handled out of my unit. For people who aren't familiar with it, this is the particle accelerator that's going to be 52 miles in circumference, buried beneath the Earth, the world's largest particle accelerator by a factor of 4 or 5. It's well, now they're saying it's going to cost $4.4 billion. The Reagan administration announced a week ago Friday their support for it. It'll employ between 3,000 and 6,000 people, you know, the kind of jobs that people really, or states really want and desire. They're clean, high-paying jobs, highly skilled people. And we're leading this competition. Well, I'm handling it for Ohio, but we're doing well. We've been working on it for 2 years, and some of the national media has ranked us in the top 5. And we'll work just as hard, or harder really, to bring that to Ohio.
I'm Ray Polani, member of the City Club Transportation Committee also. Are you in Ohio faced with rail branch lines abandonments? And if so, what has been the state attitude and action on that to preserve, you know, transportation infrastructure?
My wife used to work for USDOT and Ohio Department of Transportation. Maybe I can get her on the phone. I can't really give you a detailed answer other than to say the takeover of Conrail by Norfolk was a real threat to our state because they would have closed down a great deal of the spurs. And, you know, the spurs have a lot of impact on the state. One, it impacts your current economy, but any time a plant's looking at expansion, and these were one of the criteria for Saturn, and it's always a criteria for big industrial developments like that, is, you know, what's the rail access? And if we lose those, we become less competitive in this country, and in a sense, we become less competitive abroad. It's something we fought hard for, and a couple of our congressional members in Washington were really on the point nationally. One that comes to mind is Congressman Dennis Eckert, who's on Energy and Commerce, along with Ron Wyden, I know, and a couple others from here. But anyways, it is a threat to our state, and we are very much against that, and we're going to fight like as strong as we can. On the other hand, you're stuck in the decisions of large corporations and the government.
We have time for just one more question, Don.
Okay, I'm Don Wagner. Just a comment first. The working definition that I've heard that makes sense to me on high tech is the rate of change of technology that's required to be competitive, not necessarily the absolute amount of technology. So, anyway, for whatever that's worth. You spoke of the Silicon Valley and Route 128, which I presume is the Boston area, and that we would have some problems trying to use them as a model. You spoke of the defense research. Would there be other things that you would say would make it unreasonable to use them as a model for development for Oregon?
Well, I think the recognition there is that that level of funding concentrated in that small of an area cannot be duplicated. And assume it could be, I think, is naive. We feel that we have to create our own economic growth and agenda within our own state. We would like to have more federal R&D in the state of Ohio. And to be fair to the Boston area, that's a lot of other kinds of defense, other kinds of federal research. It's not just defense. But it's a cyclical thing. It builds up on itself. The more you put in there, the more people, the more companies that are begun, and the reputation. And that's the bureaucrats in Washington making the decisions are well aware of what they think they're buying when they go to those two areas, and maybe they are. I don't know, but in our mind, you can't assume that. Let's Palmdale, California, where the shuttle's assembled. You can't assume that you're going to have those kind of dollars flowing into a local economy from outside. It's just not going to happen. And unless the Europeans decide to assemble the European Space Association rockets, the Ariane or whatever in Ohio, you just don't have those kind of investments anywhere in the world. And let's be realistic about it. You may be able to direct some smaller sums of money, maybe from the federal government, or maybe from General Motors. GM spends $3.7 billion a year on research. But by and large, there is no way to mirror that anywhere in this country and anywhere in this world. So, that's how we view those two regions of the country. It's wonderful that Massachusetts only has 4% unemployment. I don't think you're going to mirror what's happened in Massachusetts in other parts of the country.
Our time is up. Thank you. We are adjourned.